While you panic about camping with raccoons, the Inuit survived something unthinkable: sleeping outdoors where polar bears hunt at night. The secret wasn't just weapons or luck, it was practical methods that sound simple but required incredible skill. When most people think about camping, they worry about forgetting the marshmallows. The Inuit had slightly bigger concerns, like waking up to find a 1,000-pound polar bear sniffing around their makeshift bed on the ice. No tent, no cabin, just them, the Arctic night, and some very hungry predators. Sleeping outdoors wasn't a weekend adventure for Inuit families. It was Tuesday and Wednesday, and pretty much every other day when they were traveling across the frozen landscape. They'd lay out their sleeping furs directly on the ice or packed snow, huddle together for warmth, and somehow manage to get rest while surrounded by one of nature's most efficient killing machines. The Arctic doesn't mess around when it comes to polar bears. Thousands of them roam these frozen territories, each one perfectly designed for hunting. We're talking about animals that can sprint 30 miles per hour across ice and swim for days without stopping. But here's the terrifying part. They can smell a human from over half a mile away. Half a mile. That's like a bear in downtown catching your scent from the suburbs. Your morning coffee? They know about it. That salmon you ate 3 days ago? Still broadcasting your location. The wind could shift at any moment, and suddenly, every polar bear in the neighborhood knows exactly where you're sleeping. Most of us would call this situation completely insane. The Inuit called it home. But they weren't reckless about it. These weren't people throwing caution to the wind and hoping for the best. They were survival experts who had turned living with polar bears into an art form. Generations of elders passed down knowledge that meant the difference between waking up alive or not waking up at all. Every movement pattern, every feeding habit, every behavioral quirk of polar bears was studied, memorized, and shared. Kids learned bear facts the way other children learn multiplication tables, except these lessons actually mattered for staying alive. The elders had one rule that never got broken: stay alert at all hours. Not just during the day when you could see danger coming, not just during obvious hunting times, always. Your brain had to stay switched on even when your body desperately needed rest, because polar bears don't follow human schedules, and they definitely don't care if you're tired. Well, staying alert is easier said than done when you're exhausted from traveling across frozen wasteland all day. The human body wants to shut down eventually. So how did entire families manage to sleep safely on the ice without becoming bear snacks? The answer lies in some incredibly clever systems that turned whole communities into living alarm networks. But first, we need to understand exactly how these ancient watch systems worked. Nobody slept deeply when polar bears roamed nearby. The Inuit understood this simple truth better than anyone else on Earth. Their solution? Ancient watch systems that would make modern security teams jealous. Every camp had designated watchers who took turns scanning the darkness for movement. These weren't casual glances either. We're talking about people who could spot a white bear against white snow in near total darkness. Their eyes were trained from childhood to catch the slightest shift in shadows, the tiniest disruption in the landscape. But here's where it gets really clever. The watchers never worked alone because even the most alert human needs backup. Enter the sled dogs, nature's most reliable alarm system. These dogs weren't just transportation. They were four-legged security guards with noses that could detect danger long before human senses kicked in. A team of dogs positioned around the camp created an invisible perimeter that no bear could cross unnoticed. The dogs knew their job too. They'd start with low growls when something felt wrong, then escalate to full barking if a bear actually approached. Smart families learned to read their dogs' different warning signals like a complex language. Every family member, from the youngest child to the oldest grandmother, memorized specific danger signals. Makes sense, right? When a polar bear shows up at 2 a.m., there's no time for confusion or hesitation. A sharp whistle might mean bear spotted to the north. 2 short whistles could signal everyone stay still. 3 whistles, time to grab weapons and prepare for the worst. The really fascinating part is how they positioned their camps. Nothing was left to chance. Every sleeping area was placed with perfect visibility in mind. No blind spots where a curious bear could sneak up undetected. The Inuit had learned through generations of close calls that surprise encounters usually ended badly for the humans. Sound traveled differently in the Arctic cold, and experienced families used this to their advantage. Whistles, calls, and even rhythmic tapping on hard surfaces could alert sleepers across surprising distances. The watchers developed their own communication network that functioned like an early warning system spanning multiple camps. Then there's the psychological element that most people overlook. These watch systems weren't just about spotting bears, they were about maintaining calm alertness through the long, dangerous nights. Knowing that trained eyes were scanning the perimeter allowed families to rest without panic, even when sleeping on open ice. The watchers themselves rotated duties to prevent exhaustion. Fresh eyes caught details that tired ones missed. This rotation system ensured someone was always at peak alertness when it mattered most. But even the most sophisticated watch systems had limitations in the brutal Arctic environment. Weather could reduce visibility to mere feet, and extreme cold affected both human reflexes and dog behavior. This is exactly why the Inuit developed something even more ingenious than watchers and warning signals. Previous watchers and guard dogs could only do so much against a 1,000-pound predator. The real genius lay in how Inuit families designed their camps to turn the Arctic landscape itself into their protector. Snow walls became mirrors of survival. These weren't just random barriers thrown up around sleeping areas. Families carefully angled each wall to catch and reflect moonlight, creating natural floodlights that revealed approaching bears from hundreds of yards away. The white surface bounced even the faintest starlight, turning darkness into an early warning system. Clever, right? Then there's the circular village arrangement that completely eliminated surprise attacks. Every single home positioned so that blind spots simply didn't exist. Bears couldn't sneak up from any direction without crossing someone's line of sight. This layout meant that while one family slept, another was always watching their back. The geometry of survival, you could call it. But what happens when a bear actually shows up? Escape routes stayed cleared no matter how much snow fell during the night. Families designated specific paths leading away from sleeping areas, keeping them trampled down and obstacle-free. Children learned these routes by heart before they could barely walk. Makes sense when you realize polar bears can run 30 miles per hour through snow that would stop most humans dead. Let's not forget the food storage strategy that kept bears from getting too interested in camp life. All food stores placed at least 100 yards from sleeping areas, often downwind to prevent scents from drifting toward where families rested. Bears have noses 40 times more sensitive than bloodhounds. One forgotten piece of seal meat near a sleeping platform could turn a peaceful night into a life-or-death encounter. And the weird part is how they elevated everything. Sleeping platforms built high enough off the ground that bears couldn't easily access sleeping humans. These weren't elaborate constructions either. Simple raised areas using available materials, but positioned strategically to give families precious seconds to react if a bear managed to get close. Some camps took this height advantage even further. Families built observation posts that let watchers see across vast stretches of ice while staying protected from wind and weather. These elevated positions provided clear sight lines in all directions while keeping the observer safely above ground level. The most ingenious camps combined all these elements into fortress-like arrangements that would make military engineers proud. Snow walls reflecting light, circular layouts eliminating blind spots, clear escape routes, distant food storage, and elevated sleeping areas all working together as one coordinated defense system. Every detail mattered because polar bears learned too. A bear that successfully raided one poorly designed camp would remember that success and return looking for similar opportunities. Yet even the most brilliant camp design meant nothing without the right tools and weapons ready for instant use when design alone wasn't enough. When you're sleeping on frozen ground with polar bears wandering around, keeping sharp objects close isn't just smart, it's survival. Inuit hunters always positioned their harpoons within arm's reach of their sleeping spots. These weren't decorative pieces either. A well-crafted harpoon could punch through thick bear hide and deliver enough force to stop a charging predator. Knives stayed strapped to their bodies even during sleep. Makes sense, right? You can't exactly ask a hungry polar bear to wait while you fumble around looking for your blade in the dark. The sharpest knives were often made from walrus ivory or carved bone, honed to razor-like edges that could slice through tough Arctic conditions. Then there's the ingenious trap systems that would make modern security companies jealous. Inuit families rigged simple but effective tripwires around their camps using sinew and small bones. When a bear stepped on these contraptions, the resulting noise would wake everyone instantly. The weird part is how quiet these massive predators usually are, until they hit one of these homemade alarms. But the real game changer came with access to firearms. Rifles became the ultimate equalizer against creatures that could weigh over 1,500 pounds. However, ammunition was precious and often scarce in the Arctic wilderness. Every shot had to count, which meant only the most experienced hunters handled these weapons during bear encounters. Let's not forget the four-legged security system that never slept on the job. Sled dogs weren't just transportation, they were living, breathing burglar alarms with an attitude. These dogs could detect approaching bears long before any human noticed danger lurking nearby. Their keen noses picked up bear scent from incredible distances, and their aggressive barking served as an early warning system that saved countless lives. Families also carried torches made from seal fat and dried grass. These weren't just for light. Bears typically avoid fire, and a suddenly blazing torch could buy precious seconds to grab proper weapons or wake sleeping family members. The crackling flames created shadows that made humans appear larger and more threatening to approaching predators. Well, here's where things get interesting about weapon placement. Adults never left these tools randomly scattered around camp. Everything followed strict protocols passed down through generations. Weapons stayed in designated spots where trained hands could find them instantly, even in complete darkness. Children learned these locations early, but understood the deadly serious rule. Only adults touched weapons during emergencies. The most effective defense often combined multiple tools working together. A barking dog would alert the camp. Torches would confuse and intimidate the bear, while harpoons and knives provided the final line of protection if everything else failed. And yet, all these physical preparations meant nothing without understanding the creatures they faced. The mental game, reading bear behavior and staying psychologically prepared, determined who lived through those terrifying Arctic nights. Watching a polar bear hunt seals isn't exactly like going to the zoo. These massive predators can wait motionless at a breathing hole for 6 hours straight. 6 hours. Most people can't sit through a 2-hour movie without checking their phones. But for the Inuit, understanding this incredible patience meant the difference between a safe camp and a deadly surprise. The elders noticed something fascinating about bear behavior patterns. During seal pupping season, mothers became 10 times more aggressive and unpredictable. Well, wouldn't you be cranky protecting your kids? But this knowledge helped families time their movements perfectly. They learned to avoid certain coastal areas between April and June when mother bears were nursing cubs nearby. Then there's the weird part about bear memory. Polar bears remember successful hunting spots for years, sometimes decades. They follow the same routes generation after generation, like they're using some ancient GPS system. Smart Inuit families map these invisible highways through careful observation. They'd note where bears consistently appeared, what time of day, even which direction they approached from. Bears also telegraph their intentions through body language that most people miss completely. A bear swaying its head side to side, that's not dancing. It's trying to catch a scent and could charge within seconds. Ears pinned back means serious trouble brewing. But here's what surprised many outsiders. A bear standing on its hind legs usually isn't being aggressive. It's just trying to get a better look around, like a person standing on tiptoes in a crowd. The hunting techniques bears used revealed their incredible intelligence. Some bears learned to break through ice by jumping up and slamming down with their full weight. Others figured out how to use chunks of ice as tools, throwing them at seals. Makes sense, right? If you're dealing with an animal this smart, you better be smarter. Seasonal behavior changes gave the Inuit another huge advantage. During summer months when sea ice melted, bears became more desperate and dangerous. They'd wander farther inland searching for food, making them more likely to stumble into human settlements. But in deep winter, well-fed bears often avoided areas with human scent entirely. They had plenty of seals to hunt and didn't want the hassle of dealing with people. Let's not forget the social dynamics between bears. Older males dominated the best hunting territories, pushing younger bears toward areas where humans lived. Family groups moved differently than solitary bears, taking more predictable paths along coastlines. Every detail mattered when your life depended on avoiding these apex predators. But all this careful observation and behavioral knowledge would mean nothing without the right mental approach to actually facing these creatures. The psychological preparation required to sleep peacefully, knowing a 1,000-pound predator might be nearby, took something far beyond simple courage. When weapons and smart camp designs weren't enough, Inuit families turned to something even more powerful: their minds. The Arctic wasn't just about surviving polar bears through physical defenses, it was about getting inside the bear's head while keeping your own thoughts razor sharp. Storytelling became their secret weapon. Around flickering oil lamps, elders would share tales about bears that taught crucial lessons wrapped in unforgettable narratives. These weren't just bedtime stories, they were survival manuals disguised as entertainment. Kids learned that bears could sense panic from incredible distances. Adults reinforced the idea that showing fear was like ringing a dinner bell. The stories had bite. One popular tale described a hunter who stayed so calm during a bear encounter that the massive predator actually walked away, confused by the human's complete lack of terror. Another warned about a family whose screaming and chaos attracted 3 bears instead of scaring off one. Makes sense, right? Fear spreads faster than Arctic wind, and bears are experts at reading it. Then there were the pre-sleep rituals that kept everyone mentally prepared. Families would go through specific routines before settling down for dangerous nights. They'd check escape routes one final time, review hand signals, and practice staying quiet even when startled awake. These weren't superstitions. They were mental rehearsals that could mean the difference between life and becoming bear food. But here's where things get weird. Inuit camps would sometimes arrange polar bear bones and claws in strategic patterns around their sleeping areas. The logic was brilliant. Approaching bears would smell these familiar scents and assume another bear had already claimed the territory. It was psychological warfare, bear versus bear, with humans pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Confidence became armor. Hunters learned that bears, like many predators, could somehow detect uncertainty in their prey. Walking with purpose, maintaining steady breathing, and avoiding sudden movements weren't just good tactics. They projected an aura that made bears think twice. A confident human looked less like easy prey and more like potential trouble. Mental preparation rituals varied between families, but they all shared one goal: keeping everyone alert without creating panic. Some groups would spend time before sleep visualizing successful bear encounters. Others focused on memorizing the locations of weapons and escape routes until reaching them became muscle memory. The psychological aspect went deeper than individual preparation. Entire camps developed a collective mindset of calm readiness. Children absorbed this atmosphere naturally, growing up with the understanding that staying mentally sharp was just as important as having sharp spears. Well, all this mental preparation and clever psychology worked best when the whole community acted as one unit. Individual families might survive through smart thinking, but entire camps thrived through something even more powerful than psychology. Survival in the Arctic wasn't a solo mission. When polar bears roamed nearby, individual heroics got people killed. The Inuit understood something modern survivalists often miss. Your best defense against a 1,000-pound predator isn't personal courage. It's having 30 pairs of eyes working together. Every camp operated like a well-oiled machine during bear season. Adults took shifts walking the perimeter while others slept. But here's what made it brilliant. Children as young as 8 joined these patrols, not as guards, but as apprentices. They learned to read tracks in moonlight, distinguish between wind sounds and bear breathing, and most importantly, how to stay absolutely silent when a bear was close. Makes sense, right? You can't exactly enroll in Polar Bear Defense 101 at the local community college. Then there's the communication network that would make modern emergency services jealous. When one camp spotted a bear, word spread faster than gossip in a small town. Hunters used specific smoke signals during the day and torch patterns at night. Each family knew exactly what 3 quick flashes followed by 2 long ones meant. Hungry bear heading northeast, avoid the fishing holes. But the real genius was in their seasonal movements. The Inuit didn't just randomly wander the Arctic hoping for the best. They tracked bear migration patterns across generations, creating mental maps that pinpointed exactly when and where bears would be hunting. Families coordinated their movements to avoid these danger zones entirely. Why fight a polar bear when you can simply not be where polar bears are? Let's not forget how they handled the aftermath of bear encounters. Every close call became a community learning experience. Elders would gather everyone around and dissect what happened, what worked, what didn't, and how to improve next time. No blame, no shame, just cold, hard analysis of survival tactics. The weird part is they often invited the person who made mistakes to lead these discussions. Nothing teaches better than nearly becoming a bear's midnight snack. Knowledge evolved constantly through this collective approach. A young hunter might notice bears avoiding certain wind directions. An elder could connect this observation with moon phases and weather patterns observed decades earlier. Suddenly, the entire community had a new survival advantage that would be passed down for generations. This community-first mindset created something remarkable. Arctic settlements where bear attacks became increasingly rare, not because the bears disappeared, but because human survival strategies kept improving. Each generation built upon the last, refining techniques until living alongside polar bears became almost routine. The Inuit proved that surviving nature's deadliest predators wasn't about being the strongest or bravest individual. It was about being part of something bigger, a community where everyone's survival depended on everyone else's knowledge, vigilance, and willingness to work together when death lurked just outside the firelight. Their legacy lives on in every successful survival story that followed.